I still remember the shine of that necklace, not because it was expensive, but because it used to rest on my mother's collarbone when she laughed. The last time I saw it, it was resting on Vanessa. She was pouring champagne into crystal flutes, giggling with two women I didn't recognize. Her back arched just enough to make the gold pendant catch the morning light. I stood in the doorway, my backpack still hanging off one shoulder, frozen. That necklace wasn't hers. It was the one my father gave my mother on their 10th anniversary, the one she wore to every family holiday, every school recital, every hospital visit when she was fighting for her life. I had begged to keep it after she passed, and my father had promised, "Of course, sweetheart. It's yours when you're older," but now it dangled from a stranger's neck. And she wore it like a trophy. Vanessa caught me staring, smiled through her lip-gloss teeth, and gave a little wave, as if I'd walked in on a photo shoot. "Oh, hi, sweetheart. I hope you don't mind. I found this in one of the old drawers. It's gorgeous, isn't it?" I didn't answer. I looked at my father, standing just behind her, dressed in the sweater I got him last Christmas. He gave me that look, the one that says, "Don't make a scene," the one I was starting to see more and more. "She's just borrowing it," he said later, brushing my hair behind my ear like I was still 12. "It's not a big deal." But it was a huge deal. Because that necklace didn't belong to Vanessa. And neither did our dining room, or my mother's garden, or the perfume now haunting the upstairs hallway. But slowly, without asking, Vanessa took it all. And somehow she took him too. It wasn't always this way. After my mom died, cancer stage 4, fast and cruel, my dad and I became a team. He cooked for me, stayed up to help with math homework, even took me to mother-daughter night at school, so I wouldn't feel left out. We grieved together quietly. Our house was heavy with silence, but it was ours. Then, 2 years later, came Vanessa. She was 28, tall, blonde. She wore silk blouses and heels inside the house and laughed at everything my father said, even the jokes that used to make me roll my eyes. She worked in lifestyle consulting, whatever that meant, and always smelled like orchids and money. At first I tried to give her a chance. She smiled a lot, complimented my outfits in that fake, distant tone. Told me she wanted to be friends. But friends don't rearrange your mother's furniture without asking. They don't replace homemade lasagna with quinoa bowls. They don't accidentally donate your favorite hoodie to Goodwill. It started small. A vase removed, a recipe discarded, a photo frame turned face down. And then came the rules. Shoes off before the staircase. No music after 8. Breakfast is now gluten-free, dairy-free, and joy-free. My home didn't feel like mine anymore. I remember coming downstairs one morning and seeing her in my mother's kitchen, sipping espresso from her favorite mug, the one with the chipped rim I had begged my dad not to throw away. Vanessa had redecorated the shelves, swapped out the dishes, even moved the salt to a new drawer. "You moved the salt," I said flatly. She didn't even look up. "Feng shui." When I told my dad, he chuckled. "She's just trying to help. You know how she is always organizing?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask, why is her comfort more important than my memories? But I didn't. I swallowed it. Again, I started spending more time in my room, then at friends' houses, then at school. I counted the days until college. And each time I came home, there was less and less left of her, my mother. Until one day, even her necklace was gone. That brunch party broke something in me. Not just because Vanessa wore it, but because she wore it like she owned it, like she'd earned it. Like I should be grateful she didn't sell it on Etsy. I left that day without saying goodbye. Got in my car and drove to the park where my mom used to take me on Saturdays. I sat on the same bench we used to share, fingers tracing the grooves in the wood, trying to remember the sound of her voice. And I made a promise that no matter how invisible Vanessa made me feel, no matter how many pieces of my life she tried to steal, I would not disappear. I would not forget, and I would not forgive. Of course, back then, I didn't know what she was really capable of. I thought she just wanted attention. I thought she just wanted to play house. I didn't know she'd go so far as to change my father's will while he lay in a hospital bed, too weak to lift his hand. But that moment was coming. And when it did, she'd wish the only thing she ever took from me was a necklace. He couldn't even hold the pen. I stood at the edge of the hospital room as the lawyer leaned over my father's trembling hand, guiding it to the signature line. His eyes were half closed, his skin pale and pulled tight over his cheekbones. I opened my mouth to speak, to say something, but Vanessa shot me a look over her shoulder that froze me to the floor. "Don't you dare." The lawyer finished, nodded at Vanessa, and quietly packed the papers back into his briefcase. I caught a glimpse of the document's header as he slid it shut. Amended last will and testament. "Thanks for coming in so late," she said sweetly. "He just wanted to get his affairs in order while he still can." Her voice was coated in sugar, but her eyes were steel. The lawyer nodded.
"He was adamant it happened today. I wanted to scream."
My father hadn't been adamant about anything for weeks. He could barely remember the date, let alone which assets to assign to whom. When they left the room, I sat beside him. He was drifting again, a slow, hazy fade into something quieter than sleep. "Dad," I whispered, "what did you just sign?" He blinked, his lips twitching as if trying to form words. Nothing came. That night, I couldn't sleep. Vanessa had told the nurses to limit visitors after 6 p.m. For his rest, she said. She had the password to his phone. She handled every form, every prescription, every conversation with the doctors. She had moved his pill organizer out of reach and claimed she was just being thorough. I saw what she was doing. I just didn't know how far she would go. 2 weeks later, he was gone. It didn't feel real. I kept thinking I'd hear his cane tapping across the tile floor or smell his aftershave drifting down the hallway. The funeral was small. Vanessa planned the whole thing. She chose a dove gray suit he never would have worn and handed out printed cards with his photo and her quote on the back. He was the love of my life. I noticed she didn't mention me, not once. Afterwards, she said there was some paperwork we needed to go over and told me to meet her at the attorney's office. I knew what was coming, but I didn't know how brutal it would feel. The lawyer, the same one who had hovered over my father's bed, read the amended will aloud. My name wasn't in it. Not once. Not even a side note, not a photo, not my mother's wedding ring. Nothing. The house, the savings, the business he spent 30 years building. The small plot of land he once told me was yours someday. All of it to Vanessa. My throat closed up. My ears were ringing. I thought maybe I'd heard it wrong. "That can't be right," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "My dad would never." The lawyer didn't look up. "It's all here in writing, signed and notarized." He made the decision a few weeks before he passed. When I turned to Vanessa, she was already standing. "Well," she said, smoothing her blazer, "I know this must be hard, but he wanted me to be taken care of. And you're young. You'll figure it out. You always do." And then she walked out. I sat in that office for what felt like an hour. My fingers gripped the chair arms so tightly they ached. I felt like a ghost in my own life, someone just barely remembered. He didn't forget me. I know he didn't. But he was sick, confused, drugged half the time. He trusted her to manage things, and she used that trust to cut me out completely. And the worst part, she didn't even try to deny it. She just acted like I should be grateful not to be homeless. That night I went back to the house, her house now. She had already started redecorating, a new rug, a different couch. My mother's portrait was gone from the hallway. My old bedroom was locked. She told me I'd have to make arrangements sooner rather than later. I didn't cry in front of her. I didn't give her that. But in the car, alone in the dark, I let it all out. The rage, the sorrow, the shame of watching my father disappear in body and then again in legacy. She had taken it all, not just the money but the memory of me from his final days. I could have walked away. I could have started over and told myself to let karma do its thing. But something inside me wouldn't let it go. Maybe it was my mother's voice. Maybe it was the way Vanessa smiled when she thought she'd won. Maybe it was that damn necklace. Whatever it was, I knew I couldn't leave without answers. So I went back to the office, to the hospital, to the one drawer she forgot to lock. Because if Vanessa thought the story ended with that signature, she was about to learn that paper doesn't mean power. Not when I'm the one holding the truth. The drawer stuck when I tried to open it. It was one of those old filing cabinets with a warped track. You had to lift and tug just right. Vanessa probably never figured it out. She'd already taken everything from the shelves, cleared out the top drawers, left a neatly folded cardigan over the desk chair like some strange memorial. But she missed this drawer. And inside it, beneath dusty folders and a cracked leather planner, was a single envelope. My name was written across the front. Just my name. No date. No greeting. Just a shaky, slanted Anna in my father's handwriting, the kind he used before the morphine took his strength. My hands were trembling as I opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery. His words were uneven, faded in some places, like the pen had run out halfway through a sentence. But I read it a dozen times in that dim room, heart pounding harder with every line. Anna, I don't know what I'm signing anymore. Vanessa says it's something about the estate, but the lawyer's not explaining it well. I don't feel good. I'm so tired. I trust you'll understand. Whatever happens next, it wasn't my choice. I love you more than anything. Don't forget that. That last sentence, I had to sit down. I hadn't heard him say those words in weeks, maybe months. But here they were, written when he still had enough clarity left to know something was wrong. Vanessa hadn't just manipulated a situation. She'd manipulated him. A dying man. A man too weak to understand that he was signing his daughter's future away. This wasn't grief anymore. It was war. I didn't tell her I found it. I acted normal the next time I saw her, let her brag about her new designer bag, the remodel plans for the living room, how unfortunate it was that my father didn't include me in the will. Maybe he thought you were independent enough already, she said with a wink. I smiled back. Maybe. What I didn't say was that I had already taken the letter to a legal friend of mine, someone who confirmed that if I could prove my father was mentally compromised, and pressured I had a real case for undue influence. But I needed more than a letter, so I started digging. First, I pulled up every email thread I had with my father from the months before his death. The change in tone was subtle but clear, thoughtful and warm at first, then clipped, almost confused. In one message, he asked me what day it was. In a conversation about Thanksgiving plans. Then I looked at Vanessa's public social media accounts. I had blocked her years ago, but now I was curious. She hadn't posted much about my father during his illness, just one carefully staged, "Get well soon" bouquet. But just 2 weeks before he died, she posted a photo of a Louis Vuitton suitcase with the caption, "Finally treating myself." The location tag, Cancun. I cross-checked the date. It was the same weekend my dad had been hospitalized with an infection. She left him while he was dying. Then came Marcus. I didn't know who he was at first, just a name that popped up in a notification banner on her iPad one day when she wasn't around. "Thanks for the transfer," with a winking face. I memorized the number and called in a favor from my cousin Emily, who works in IT security. She was hesitant, said this wasn't exactly legal. I just told her the truth. "That woman stole everything from us," I said. "I just want to know who she's really talking to." Within a few days, Emily had traced the number to a burner account, and then to a second number registered to a Marcus D., a man with a trail of sketchy real estate ventures and a history of civil suits, one of which listed Vanessa's maiden name as a former co-defendant. They'd worked together before. They'd done this before, and now they'd done it to us. It felt like the world had split in two, the life Vanessa pretended to live, and the one she actually inhabited. She wasn't just a grieving widow. She was a calculating thief, and she'd chosen my family as her latest mark. But this time she didn't know who she was up against. Because I wasn't the fragile daughter crying in the corner anymore. I was my father's daughter, the one he trusted, the one he loved, the one he tried, even in his final days, to warn. And I was listening now. With the letter, the timeline, the photos, and the evidence of Marcus, I started building my case, quietly, thoroughly, but I wasn't ready to take her down yet. Not just in court. I wanted her to feel it, the slow unraveling of everything she thought she'd secured. I wanted her to watch it all slip through her fingers the way she thought my father had slipped from mine, because I still had his words, his letter, his truth. And now I had the power. The next time she smiled in my direction, I smiled back. Let her have her moment. It wouldn't last. The roses were imported from Ecuador. The catering was from a 5-star French bistro downtown. There were champagne flutes with gold rims, a live pianist playing soft classical music, and valet parking in front of the house my father built with his bare hands. It didn't feel like a memorial. It felt like a launch party. Vanessa had invited over 100 people, most of whom didn't even know my father's middle name. She floated through the crowd in a black silk dress that looked suspiciously like designer, hugging people tightly and whispering, "He would have loved this, wouldn't he?" As if this spectacle was ever something he'd want. I stood quietly near the back patio, watching her play the grieving widow. People glanced at me, some with pity, some with confusion. One woman even asked, "Are you the assistant?" I smiled. "No, I'm the daughter." She blushed and apologized, but I'd gotten used to it. Vanessa had done such a good job erasing me from the narrative, I might as well have been a stranger in my own story. But that was about to change. There was a moment in the program, yes, she had a program, when guests were invited to come up and say a few words about my father. Vanessa had asked me beforehand if I wanted to say anything, but the way she phrased it told me she didn't actually want me to. "If you'd rather just grieve quietly," she had said, "I completely understand. You've already been through so much." I had nodded. Yeah, quiet might be best. Now it was time. I walked up slowly, heels clicking on the marble floor of the living room. She was standing near the fireplace, surrounded by her crowd, laughing too loudly at something someone said. I didn't look at her. I looked at the people who didn't know my father, the few genuine ones in the crowd. My Uncle George. A neighbor who used to help him with the garden. An old friend from the Navy who sat in the corner, hands folded over a cane, and I began. At first I didn't want to speak today. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't know how to say it. The room quieted. My father was a quiet man. Not the type to demand attention. But he was present, steady, honest. He loved in small, consistent ways. The kind that don't always show up in speeches or photos but stay with you long after someone's gone. People nodded. Vanessa looked annoyed, maybe because I wasn't breaking down in tears the way she hoped. But I found something recently, I continued. A letter. From him, written just before he passed. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folded page, its edges worn from the number of times I'd held it, reread it, cried into it. I'd like to read it now. Vanessa took a step forward. I didn't stop. Anna, I don't know what I'm signing anymore. Vanessa says it's something about the estate, but the lawyer's not explaining it well. There were audible gasps. I kept going. I trust you'll understand. Whatever happens next, it wasn't my choice. I folded the letter gently and set it on the podium. And now I want you to understand something too, I said, turning to face the crowd. This woman, I pointed to Vanessa, used my father's illness to manipulate him, to isolate him, to rewrite his will while he was under sedation. Vanessa's face went pale. She told him it was just paperwork, that it didn't matter, but it did. And she knew it. She opened her mouth. This is completely inappropriate, I raised my voice. She also failed to mention the bank accounts she opened under her maiden name. Or the money she wired to a man named Marcus, her business partner and secret boyfriend. The silence was thunderous. Someone started recording. I saw a woman in the front row clutch her pearls like a soap opera was playing out in real time. She left him alone during his final days to go shopping in Cancun. She didn't post about his treatment. She posted about spa packages. Vanessa lunged forward then, grabbing the mic, her voice trembling. She's lying. She's always been jealous of me. That S when the family leader, the same one who read the will, stood up from the back of the room. I've reviewed the evidence, he said calmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. And I can confirm that an investigation into possible fraud and undue influence is now underway. Vanessa went completely still. No more fake tears, no more confident smiles. Just silence. I set the mic down on the table. I didn't need to say anything else. The letter had spoken for itself. And for him. I walked past her, steady and slow, through a room now echoing with whispers and stares and suspicion. She had the spotlight for months. Now she had the truth. And it burned brighter than any chandelier she could hang in that house. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No gavel slam, no gasps. Just the quiet sound of the judge clearing his throat and saying the words I'll never forget. The court finds sufficient evidence of undue influence and fraudulent misrepresentation. The estate is to be reassigned under new settlement terms. Case closed. Vanessa didn't look at me. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. She just sat there in her stiff blazer, the same one she wore to my father's memorial. Fingers clutched too tightly in her lap, like she could still hold something if she gripped hard enough. But she couldn't hold the house. She couldn't hold the bank accounts. She couldn't hold me anymore, either. The settlement wasn't perfect. These things never are. A portion of the funds had already been moved overseas, unrecoverable, but most of the estate returned. The deed to the house was rewritten under my name. My father's company, once on the brink of liquidation, was mine to manage, and Vanessa. She vanished. Disappeared from town the week after the ruling. Her social media accounts were wiped clean, no goodbye. No apology, not that I expected one. What surprised me was how quiet it all felt. I thought justice would feel louder. The house was the first thing I faced. At first, I didn't even want to step inside. Every wall held echoes of things she'd touched, things she'd ruined. But then I remembered something my mom used to say when she repotted plants: roots grow again when you clear the rot. So I started clearing, the wine-colored wallpaper Vanessa installed. Gone. I stripped it down to the bones. Repainted the kitchen in soft sage green, my mother's favorite color. Tore out the chandelier she had ordered from Italy and replaced it with the same old glass fixture my dad once installed with duct tape and a prayer. Room by room, I peeled back her presence. Underneath it all, I found us again. In the office, I hung 2 portraits. One of my father, sitting at his workshop bench, grease on his shirt, that stubborn squint in his eyes. And beside him, my mother, laughing at something off camera, her hair pinned up with one of those old butterfly clips I used to steal. I reopened the business under my dad's name, Harrison and Daughter Automotive. The first week, I had only 2 customers. One of them was Mr. Calhoun, our neighbor from 3 doors down, who shook my hand so tight I thought I'd cry. He'd be proud, he said. I think he would. One evening after closing up the shop, I walked through the back gate and into the garden, the one Vanessa tried to turn into a minimalist Zen space with gravel and cement orbs. Now it was wild again. Sunflowers stretched toward the sky. The peach tree was full. Vines curled around the old trellis where my parents once slow danced during a summer barbecue. I sat on the wooden bench beneath it, the same one I'd hidden under when I was 8, scared of thunderstorms. I took a deep breath. It smelled like home again. She thought she erased me with a pen, but I rewrote the story. In ink she never hold again, not because I wanted revenge, not really. I just wanted truth to stand where lies once lived. I wanted the walls of my childhood to stop whispering her name. I wanted to stop flinching every time I smelled orchid perfume or heard someone call me sweetheart like it was a warning. And now it's just quiet, in the best way. If you've ever had someone take what's yours, your family, your peace, your voice, don't let them keep the ending too. Subscribe to my channel for more true stories just like this one.